anyway, I was a combat engineer officer. I went to school for computers, and then I got out, and you know, in the Army, I wanted to be a combat engineer officer because I really liked doing explosives. So good news was a lot of that work in the Army. So I did 5 years active duty, mostly doing counter IED work overseas. But then you come home, and I'm sure I don't have to tell this crowd too much about that, and things are all different at home. And so not a lot of roadside bombs here in central Maryland. So all my job skills I had from the Army kind of didn't have a use for them here. So I did another 5 years in the Guard, 10 years altogether. The National Guard was a great resource while I was starting my business because it was cheap healthcare and dental and a paycheck once a month to kind of defray the costs of, as we'll talk about, the challenging finances as I got started. But what happened is I got home, there really were no jobs. So I came home in 2009 during the middle of the recession. I just really wanted to get out of the Army. I didn't want to do it anymore, at least active duty. Probably not the smartest financial decision. So I just found myself like 6 months after I got home from Iraq, I was on unemployment, which is like, was gutting, like, you know, from a morale perspective. It was really humiliating. I was embarrassed. I still have that unemployment card. It was kind of motivation at home, but I had to find something to do. So no one wanted to hire me. I knew I wasn't worthless. I knew I had some value. So I started looking around at potential business ideas. I was single when I was in, and I was overseas for most of it. So just by default, I ended up saving money because you can always buy so much stuff, you know, on Amazon. And the PX everywhere I was always had crappy stuff. So I don't want to buy Celine Dion CDs and Mosul. So I'll keep my money in my pocket. So anyway, so I started looking around, and I kind of like sustainability. I like it as a business idea. I'm not like fully committed to sustainability. I drove an F-150 here, and I'm eating skirt steak, so I'm not all in on sustainability, okay? I don't, at some of the green events, I'm not green enough. But I do think there are some parts of it that make sense. And one thing that I think about sometimes, like, what are the things that are gonna be hard to explain to our grandkids? And one of the things I think about is kind of waste, and like how 50 years from now, we're gonna explain to kids that we thought it was a really good idea to dig a hole in the ground, dump all of our crap in there, cover it with dirt and plant grass, and just drive away. And if we make it a soccer field, it's as if it was never there. Like, that's kind of irresponsible. So we need to do something with our waste. And so I started looking at businesses that had to do with recycling and scrapping metal, a lot of people doing that. I looked at electronic recycling, all the cell phones and computers and things like that. It's a very small part of the waste stream, and there were already some people doing it. And then I looked at the pie chart of all the trash in America, and 60% of what's in the back of every trash truck around this country is compostable. It's yard debris, it's untreated wood waste, it's paper waste, or it's food waste. So 2/3 of every trash truck that drives by you today or tomorrow, that's material that could have been composted instead of buried in the ground. And on the flip side of that, our soils suck in this country. It's all washing away into the ocean. If you're here in Maryland, it's all washing into the bay. It's all trapped behind the Conowingo Dam. So we need to rebuild our soils if we're going to keep feeding ourselves. You see all those articles about how we're going to feed 7 billion people or 10 billion people in 20 years. We need better soil to do it. So when I looked at composting, there's all this raw material. There was a demand on the back end for what you were going to make. And the day I started here in Maryland, I was the 3rd operation in the state. So imagine if you go to the Olympics and you get in the starting blocks and they just immediately hand you the bronze medal. You just showed up and you're number 3. So like, sweet. And at the time, it was the Wild West of things. And it's still to some degree is. There's nobody that has a composting degree. It's a degree that doesn't exist right now. So all of what I have is on the job training or things I've learned and accrued. So it kind of was appealing because there were no certificates and there were no barriers to entry. It was, I got a shovel, got a couple bucks in my pocket, let's see where this goes. Anyway. So I built the first pile in July of 2010. I did all the things you're supposed to do if you go to sit down with a business advisor. I got stop loss in Iraq, so I got part of my grad school paid for. So I went back to school to learn business and was doing that at night. I made a business plan, and then I started reaching out to real estate agents and economic development authorities trying to find property to start my compost business. This was 2009, 2010 when the economy and real estate was cratered. And everybody I went to, nobody returned my phone calls, no one returned my emails, no one wanted to rent me space. And I was really down, I didn't know what to do. So I went where a lot of people go when they're desperate to find stuff, and I went to Craigslist. And so the farm that I've been leasing for what'll be 10 years next year, I found on Craigslist. So sometimes you gotta go the non-traditional route. And so these guys said, look, as long as we get paid on the first every month, we don't really care what you do out here. Just don't make a mess. So, okay. I don't come from a family with any sort of waste background. I don't come from a farming background. If you're from Maryland, I grew up in Howard County near the mall. So I went to Wild Lake High School, which is nowhere near a farm, right? So this was all new to me living on a farm. But I started small with the money in my pocket, just me, just a shovel. And you can see now that we've grown. We have our main facility in Aberdeen. We have a small facility we run in Fairfax, Virginia on a leased farm. And then we're building or trying to build a third facility in Anne Arundel County that'll open hopefully before I die. But we've grown from just me now to 20 full-time employees and a handful of part-time employees as well. We collect and compost food scraps. So that's the gist of the business. Probably should have told you that 3 slides ago. But what we do is we collect and we compost food scraps. We pick up food scraps from restaurants and hospitals and big institutions. We do it from office break rooms. We do it from people's homes. Any size, any scale. That's what we pick up and that's what we compost. And I'll pass around a sample later of what that compost looks like. And then we make a bunch of products out of that compost. We'll talk about the process in a second in case you can't visualize it on a big scale. But we make compost, we make different soil blends, potting mixes, things like that that people are using to grow. And next year we're rolling out a whole product line focused on the cannabis industry, which is really interesting because it went from illegal to now a moneymaker. So we're going to cash in on that next year. Everybody has their own tolerance for debt and how they want to raise money and investors and things like that. But I didn't want to go ask family or friends for money, which is often what people do. Because if this didn't work, I didn't want to have to see my grandmother every year at Christmas and be like, I'm really sorry about that 10 G's, Grandma. Like, sorry that compost thing didn't work out. So the first 6 months I was in business, I started in July. Between July 2010 and December 2010, I made $350. That's not profit, that's total revenue, right? So like I spent thousands and thousands of dollars on rent and insurance and buying a tractor and a truck and all that stuff. If I bought scratch-off tickets with that same amount of money, I would have been way ahead of the $350 that I had. And not to go too far down the rabbit hole of how sad it was and how bad it got, but the whole reason I started doing this is because I couldn't get a job. Well, this got so bad, I had to get a job. And so what happened when I was 6 months in and I was watching the cash just burn right out of the place, I got a job working nights. So the way my schedule was for about the first year was during the day I would work on my business, maintaining the property, trying to get it going. Then in the evenings I would drive 2 hours to Penn State to go to grad school and drive back. Then I would clock in and I worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. as a night desk clerk at a Holiday Inn, right, making minimum wage. And when I started working there, it's on the side of I-95 in Aberdeen, Maryland. They were like, cool, you were in the Army, we're gonna fire the security guard. You can be the security guard and the desk clerk. You'll be a one-man show. Like, this is a huge cost savings for us as a hotel. So I'm by myself on the side of I-95 in a 200-room hotel, working there from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. But the joke was on them because I figured out how to do an 8-hour job in 3 hours. And so for 5 hours a night, I was either sleeping behind the counter or I was doing all my computer work for my business. So if you're one of my customers, or I didn't have any customers, but a potential customer at the time, you probably got emails from me at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning as I'm losing my mind working the overnight shift. And then at 7 a.m., I'd sleep in my car, go back home, and start it all over again. And then on the weekends, I did the National Guard. So there's that never quit thing in the Army creed or whatever. Like, damned if I'm not married to that idea. So it's however committed to it you are, but I was determined to make this thing happen. I still am. So, you know, we still fight through all the challenges. But bootstrapping is one way to go, and I certainly have been there. I ate a lot of ramen when this thing got going. So it's a 30-acre farm, and if you were to zoom out on Google Maps from where we're at, we're walking distance to a Rita's Water Ice and a 7-Eleven. So there are neighbors on 3 sides of us. The leaves are down in the fall. You can see the neighbors on 3 sides of us right now, and the 4th side is I-95. So we are not in the boonies. We are right on the edge of suburbia. With this 30-acre property, we only use about 2 or 3 acres for the composting. Our operation's pretty tidy, so the rest of the area is essentially buffer space. But I did live in that farmhouse for several years. Hard to date when you live in an old beaten-up farmhouse, but I am now married with 2 kids, so it does work out. We can try harder. The biggest thing for us is, like I talked about, when we started, we were the 3rd operation in the state to have a permit. Those other 2 guys, they lost their permits for mismanagement. So for most of the last 9 years, we've been the only permitted company to operate a facility, and we've been the only company for as long as I've been in business that collects and actually composts the material. So we're vertically integrated. If you think about business ideas, I pick it up and then I bring it to myself, and then I sell it myself as well. We sell direct to customers, so we control all of that, which means we get to control all the quality and all the steps, theoretically control all the profitability along the way, but you know, we're always working on that. So our other facility is a lot smaller. If you ever go to our Virginia site, it's kind of our regular facility, same technology, we just shrunk it down. So we were talking earlier about composting in Virginia. I'm only allowed to do 100 cubic yards at a time, and I'm not allowed to sell my compost there. There's a whole raft of issues with the compost permits in Virginia. So this is our one and only in Virginia, and I'm not coming back to Virginia to build another one until they change the laws. So we're back in Maryland building our third site. But it's a cool site. It's right in Fairfax, Virginia. Even though it's a really small site, we employ 15 guys there. So between the drivers and the guys that work there. So it doesn't take a lot of footprint for us to really create jobs. And the company, Veteran Compost, we hire veterans and their family members. Probably should have mentioned that on our other slide too. But the majority of our workforce, about 2/3 of our workforce is veterans, and then the remainder is family members of veterans. So I'm always trying to find guys and girls that are looking for work, that want to come work with us. Certainly not a job for everybody. We're out there when it's 10 degrees, and we're out there when it's 110 degrees. And if it's snowing, we're probably out there if it's not snowing too bad. All the compost we produce there at that farm, though, we use on the farm. And so we're taking what was an older farm, working with the farmer to kind of rejuvenate the soil and increase the soil fertility. So it's kind of cool to watch all the soil kind of come back to life. They're having better crop yields and stuff like that with the material that we produce. Pay us to pick their stuff up, which we then compost and sell. It's a pretty good scam, don't tell anybody. Get paid for your raw materials and then turn around and sell them right back to people. We have people that drop off material to us. So I refuse to own a truck that picks up dumpsters because those are like $250,000. So I'm happy to let guys with dumpster trucks bring them to us. And so we have a number of customers who haul material to us. If you ever have, we'll name drop here in a little bit, but Heavy Seas Beer is a good example. About every 10 days, a 20-yard container of hops, nothing but hops, shows up at our facility from their brewery. So all the grain from a brewery can be taken out for cattle feed, but the hops is inedible. And so every 10 days or so, 20 yards of hops shows up, and it smells like a 30-year-old IPA bachelor party out there. It smells like beer out there in the field. We do a lot of special events, so like the Marine Corps Marathon's one we just wrapped up recently. We collect all the orange peels if you're ever running the race at mile marker 7 right there by the water gate, where they give out oranges and then chuck the peels from the oranges, and then me and the Marines sit there and sweep them all up, and we take them away and compost them. When we do people's weddings, we do festivals, all kinds of stuff like that. As people start to look at greening all the ways of their life, events are a great way. So we do a lot of compostable cups and plates and things like that from events, weddings, office parties, stuff like that. We sell our products, and then I do some consulting work occasionally. So let's talk about what's compostable. In your backyard, maybe you do fruits and vegetables, you do leaves, we do everything. So if you bought it at the store, at a grocery store, I can compost it. Right now we're doing a lot of meat because it's after turkey. It's Turkey Day. We do a lot of seafood because we're, of our business in Maryland, crabs, oysters, things like that. We do bones, dairy, all kinds of stuff like that. If it came from a grocery store, we can compost it. And then compostable plates, cups, things like that, things that are labeled certified compostable. If you go to Sweet Green, we're now, 2018 was the year of the straw, the war on straws. So a lot of places now have compostable straws. We take those in every day and compost them as well. So it's a lot more material than just your fruit, your apple cores and things like that. We take in everything to try to make it easy for our customers, and also try to grab as much material as possible and keep it out of the landfill. This was the third customer I ever got. So quick diversion on how I got my first customer. For 6 months, I couldn't get anybody to sign up. If you ever want to have your ego just completely in the gutter, go cold call. I used to go door to door at restaurants, and people would I'd have hostesses, they would just beat me up. I didn't even get to talk to the manager. The hostess would just kick the crap out of me and send me out the door like some loser salesman. So I was down the dumps, things not going well for Justen. I get a call from the Crab Shanty in Ellicott City. They were composting with a different company, and those people didn't show up on time. That was their big complaint. I said, I'll be down there tomorrow. Try to hide my excitement, like the phone's not ringing, So the next day it snowed. It snowed like 1.5 inches, which around here is like a foot of snow in Boston, right? So I drive the hour from where I'm at in Aberdeen down to Ellicott City, and I left early, made sure I got there on time, walked in the door. They were blown away I showed up, and they said, we didn't think you were coming. I said, well, isn't that the whole problem with the other guys? They don't show up, right? I'm the guy who shows up. And they were like, when do we start? So sometimes, if you understand your customer's needs, it's kind of straightforward. And so they were my first customer. This is my third customer, GBMC. I beat out Waste Management on this deal, and the first day I went to go pick up, I just had a crappy little trailer I bought on Craigslist. Shout out to Craigslist. behind my Chevy Trailblazer. I didn't have a big trash truck or some big operation. I was a 10-foot used trailer with peeling paint on the back of a Chevy Trailblazer. And I back up to this hospital among big rigs and shiny trucks. And the first day we picked up the bins, there were 7 people on the loading dock. It was not, I thought no one would be there. It was the kitchen manager, the vice president of operations for the hospital, the PR department, legal counsel, all these people that were here to witness this historic day that were collecting the first compost bins. And then I realized I didn't do a good survey before I got there. My trailer, there's no ramp. And so they're up on a loading dock and my trailer's down here. So I, with an audience of 7 people, took 300-pound compost bins and hopped them down 5 metal steps. And as I'm doing it, they're like, is that gonna work? I'm like, oh yeah, I do it all the time. I'm like, inside I'm like dying. I'm like, I'm gonna cripple myself, you know, as 7 people watch. So maybe do a little bit of recon when you sign up your customers. But we drop off clean bins, people fill them up, then our truck shows up. We grab the dirty bins and we leave clean bins behind. So we do a 1-for-1 swap. So no one ever has to wash anything, no one has to worry about pests or odors or anything like that, because we're gonna take the bin with us. And what we do is we take it back to the farm. We have a big concrete receiving pad. We put down wood chips from tree companies. We dump our food waste out, and that wood chip material grabs all the moisture. And then we don't have robots or big sorting machines. We have $9 gloves and $12 boots. And so we get out there and pick out any trash that might be in there, and then we mix the material together. So we use just some basic loaders and skid loaders to mix the wood chips and food scraps together. And what we do is we do the set it and forget it method, just kind of like the round cove rotisserie. Once we build the pile down here, it's about 50 feet wide and 300 feet long, about 12 feet high. Once we build that pile, we don't touch it again for 30 days. We have long pipes in the pile, and we're hooked up to blowers that force air in the pile. Now, if you're a resident of Prince George's County, multi-million-dollar facility uses the same technology. Howard County is a $6.4 million facility that uses this same technology. Justen Garrity does not have $6.4 million, or we would be Skyping from the goddamn Caribbean, because I would not be here. I'd be in a $6.4 million house, which would not be very financially prudent. Probably should save some of that. But anyways, this is not it. So we do more material per day than a $6.4 million Howard County facility with a system that's the same technology with parts that I buy on Amazon. We buy moon bounce blowers, 1 horsepower green electric moon bounce blowers. We buy extension cords at Home Depot, and I buy timers on eBay. And we're able to replicate that same system, because when you don't have money, you gotta figure out how to get stuff done. When you got money, you figure out ways to spend it. So what we do is we do 30 days of composting down here, where we're forcing air in the pile. And all those hamburgers and hot dogs and your skirt steak and your vegetables, with that mixture with wood chips, it goes from ambient temperature to 140 degrees Fahrenheit in about 48 hours. That pile is cooking. So if you're out there this morning, the steam is high. And what we do is we have one piece of technology that's kind of cool that we have is we now have Bluetooth enabled temperature probes. And so I can walk down the line with my phone and I can grab all the temperatures from the pile. And if it gets too hot or too cold, we can adjust the blowers accordingly on our timers of how often we put air into the pile and how long the duration is on. But we want to be at 140 degrees, because just like you cooked that turkey last Thursday, you don't want salmonella and E. coli. Well, I don't want that in your compost. So we make sure that we break everything down from really high temperatures to blast out all the pathogens. And then eventually we cool it down to an ambient temperature you want to put in your garden.